Yes, I know. I know he has a fucked up, burned up face. I'm sorry. There's nothing I can do about that. I get it. You know, I really do get it. You're still my favorite, okay? But I gotta review other movies too. Alright? He gets so fucking jealous. I can't believe this guy. Really? Really? You're just gonna sit there and look at me like that. You're not even gonna say anything. Fucking head. Anyways, how's it going today, guys? This is Bronco Juggalo. I'm coming from you deep from within the bowels of my man cave in the middle of fucking nowhere. And today we're going to be doing a review of my second favorite horror movie of all time, The Nightmare on Elm Street. This movie was directed by and created by Wes Craven in 1984. It stars Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger and Heather Langenkamp as Nancy, with a memorable and always iconic score and theme song from Charles Bernstein. This is a one-in-a-kind film. This is a film that created an entire studio. It created an entire company out of this one film. Now, when I say that, the company was already there, but this is what made this company huge. This movie is what made New Line Cinema huge. That's why they call New Line Cinema the house that Freddy built. Okay, guys, so right away from the opening sequence, this movie starts you off on a great footing. It gives you such a great tone of what it's going to be. Those iconic notes play, and you see a man crafting a glove. Not just any glove, the iconic Freddy Krueger glove with the 4 razor knife fingers. Right away it sets the tone for this film. It's a dark film. It is definitely the darkest one in the entire series, with arguably of New Nightmare. Some people will say that the remake was pretty dark too, but in my opinion it's a remake and it's dark because the original was dark. There is so many pros in this movie, and in my opinion there's only one con, which I'll get to later. But for the first pro, we have the characters. Now, aside from Freddy Krueger, you have your base group of characters that the killer always goes after. And a lot of times in horror movies, i.e. the Friday the 13th series especially, these characters are usually throwaway. They're characters that nobody cares about. They usually don't build up their backstories much, or you don't take much of a vested interest in them. Which is a shame, really, because it helps you get more into the characters and helps you get more into the movie if you have some sort of interest in the characters. In this case, it's the complete opposite. You have 3 characters aside from Freddy and Nancy that are great characters surrounding her, and then you have 2 other auxiliary characters that are just as good and have just as big of a role and story in this film. The first 3 I'm going to mention are her friends, her boyfriend Glenn, who is played by the newcomer at the time, Johnny Depp, getting his big break on screen. You have Tina, who is the person that at first you think this movie is about, but then we find out that it's not about her. And you have Rod. Rod is Tina's boyfriend. Rod, he's a kind of a troubled kid, troublemaker in a way. Kind of your 80s typical troublemaker. Wears the leather jacket and carries a switchblade. He's kind of a little thug in the 80s sense of the word. Glenn, who is your stereotypical jock and good guy boyfriend. And then you have Tina, who is the best friend, who's had a bit of a troubled past with her parents and is on the verge of a nervous breakdown with all of the nightmares that she's having. So then you have your 2 auxiliary characters, and those are Nancy's parents. Marge, the mother, who is an alcoholic, and then the father, who is a cop. His name is Donald. He's a good guy, but he's also, obviously he has problems with everything Nancy does, with all of her friends. He's your typical father who's not there all the time because he's always working and because the parents are divorced. But they all add a little something extra to this melting pot of a movie, which is really good because a lot of movies, like I said, in the horror genre, throw away their side characters. They're just cannon fodder for the killer to kill, and that's all they are. But when these people get killed, you actually feel a little something for them. You feel like, man, that's part of what I'm into. I'm invested in those people. So you feel bad when they die, and it brings a whole new level of enjoyment to the film. The story goes that Wes Craven came up with this idea based off of a newspaper article he read, I guess, of a boy who was having dreams and didn't want to go to sleep. They even found a coffee pot in this kid's closet filled with coffee cans, all sleeping, no sleep pills everywhere. And he was dreaming that he was going to be killed in his dreams, and then one day he did die in his sleep while dreaming. So he got this idea and he put it into this movie, and he was going to base it around Freddy Krueger, a child molester / killer. But at the time, there was a child molester in his hometown, and he decided to take that part out. And personally, I'm glad he did. It brought just making him a child killer was threatening enough. They redid it into the remake, and it totally takes away from the movie, in my opinion. Making him a child molester is just not as good of an idea as making him a child killer. Plus, it takes away a lot of the points of the movie. So, that being said, Freddy is a child killer who, and yes, there will be spoilers in this. If you haven't seen Nightmare on Elm Street, go out and see it before you watch this. Freddy is a child killer who the parents of the town, after he gets off because of a mishandling of the evidence, he gets off on the case. The parents find him, surround the place he's in, burn it down, and he dies. And then he comes back in people's dreams. He comes back in teenagers' dreams, in young people's dreams, as this scarred, burned up person with knives on his hand, which he made for when he was killing kids before he died. And he kills them in their dreams, and then what happens in their dreams happens to them in real life, and they die. And that's the basic premise of the movie. This first movie, which has spawned a franchise of 7 sequels, a remake, and even a television show, is one of the most successful horror franchises of all time. So, onto our main character of Freddy Krueger. He is the killer. He is the one we're all here to see. He is the one who has done everything right. He is another big pro in this movie. The great Robert Englund, who was a great actor to begin with. The man was a stage actor, a classically trained actor. He alone made Freddy Krueger into what he is today, the icon that he is today. It was his performance as Freddy Krueger that was, hands down, what made this movie such a success. A couple of the pros with the Freddy character, is one, the Freddy makeup. They made his face, and I've been told, I'm not sure if this is 100% true or not, but I've been told and read in a couple articles that they modeled his face after a burned piece of pizza, or a piece of cheesy pizza that was all melty. And in this first movie, that comes off better than any other. It comes off because his face looks kind of wet. It's peeling in places. And it's kind of like got little pieces dangling there like it was from a piece of mozzarella cheese. So it looks really good. It looks really awesome. And they do such a good job in building the mystique and the mystery of this character. And also the fear of this character. With not only the makeup and the effects, but also by keeping him half in the shadow half the time. Like you could see this part of his face, or you could see this part of his face, but then that part was in the shadow. You know, there was just so many good things about that they did well, that I wish people today would do better, because they so rely on CGI now that practical effects, which I think honestly, in my opinion, make a movie a lot better, have kind of fallen to the wayside a little bit, especially in horror, and that's not a good thing. There was some CGI used in this movie for its time. I don't even know if they called it CGI back then, but there was some CGI in this movie that was used, but it wasn't used all that much. Most of the effects that were done were practical effects, and that is also a huge pro in this movie. My favorite effect scene in this entire movie is when Freddy knocks the crucifix off the wall, and he comes out of the wall. That was a very simple effect they did with a sheet and him coming through the sheet like that, and then they just superimposed it to the wall. It was done very practically, very easily. That being said, those are all pros to this movie. This movie is my second favorite horror movie of all time, falling only behind Halloween. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. It is probably one of the greatest horror movies ever made. If you want a movie that you can sit at even 30 years later, watch, and still get the piss scared out of you, it's Nightmare on Elm Street. So Nightmare on Elm Street 1 is the only movie out of horror movies that I've ever watched that did give me a nightmare. But it's not a nightmare really that scares me, but it is one I had recurring until I was about 16 or 17 years old. There is one con I have to say for this movie. It is the only con I think in this movie. And it is an effects shot con. At the end of the movie, the very ending of this movie, Freddy reaches through a window, a very small window, grabs Nancy's mom and pulls her in. This is the only con of this movie in my opinion. The con in this movie is that when he pulls her in, you can clearly see that it's a doll. And not only can you clearly see that it's a doll, it looks like a blow-up doll. Like a blow-up sex doll, which just is totally weird. I forgive that flaw, I really do, because this movie is so great that you can just forgive it. Well guys, that is my review of A Nightmare on Elm Street. I suggest that if you haven't seen it, you go out and see it as soon as possible. It is one of the best horror movies of all time. It is definitely a buy it choice. So that is what I'm giving this movie today. I am giving it a buy it. Add it to your collection and revere it, because you will love it. This is Bronco Juggalo saying, till next time, don't fall asleep. Have a good one, guys.